There was a time when there were lush green forests here. The area was home to scores of bird and animal species. But then, the people of this region began to clear jungles for agriculture. It seemed the only way to sustain growing numbers. In no time, the majestic Aravalli range was reduced to a barren and sterile mass. Not even 10% of the land remained forested.
मामलात बंद होने के कारण किसी भी गांव वाले का या किसी पंचायत का कंट्रोल नहीं था। कंट्रोल ना होने के कारण ये गरीब आदमियों ने पेड़ काटकर और बाजार में बेच दिए।
Once the forests were cleared, the land became exposed to rain and strong winds. Flash floods accelerated soil erosion. What happened here is happening across the country. Closer home in the Aravallis, once the fertile topsoil was lost, the ecology of the area deteriorated. No trees meant droughts became frequent, and agriculture, the focus of all activity, suffered. The pastures began to turn barren. Villagers had to trudge long hours to find grass for cattle. The milk yield fell, and money became scarce. By the 80s, it became evident that the Aravallis couldn't sustain humans anymore. In the Aravallis, planners were forced to get their act together, and a forestation program was launched. Today, the Aravalli project stands as one of the most successful conservation stories in India. Forests contain nearly half the world's species of plants and animals. They provide our basic subsistence needs of fuel wood, food, fodder and building materials. For centuries, people have been dependent on forests for all their needs, from the water they drink to the clothes they wear. These are the obvious benefits of forests, but forests also have other benefits. They help maintain oxygen supply and freshness of the air. They bind soil, intercept heavy rainfall, and help in recharging underground water. The tree of life is more than just a phrase. A tree acts as an environmental buffer, regulating climate and atmospheric humidity. By the unique process of photosynthesis, plants convert solar energy into food for the Earth's residents. Through photosynthesis, plants also lock up carbon dioxide, a major contributor to global warming.
In 1891, 40% of India was under forest cover. In 1991, government estimates put forest cover at 19%. By 1995, unofficial estimates put it at barely 8%. 10,000 years ago, there were only 4 million people on Earth. Now there are nearly 6 billion. And in barely 25 years, there will be 9 billion.
Growing population taxes the forests. More people means more mouths to feed. It also means more industries and a greater need for timber. Environment protection takes a back seat, even though conservation is critical if future generations are to be sustained. Take the case of the Gujars of Rajaji National Park. This tribal community consisted of 512 families in 1987. In 7 years, it doubled. Today there are 10,000 Gujars in the park. Traditionally, the Gujars were nomadic. This meant that the Gujars never had to rely on a single forest area to meet their needs. Now not only have their numbers increased, but the Gujars have also settled down. The results are overgrazing of land, cutting of trees, and consequently depletion of forests. It's ironic that a community which once lived in harmony with forests is today one of the biggest threats to the ecosystem. And yet, many believe the situation can be reversed if Gujars are co-opted into a forest protection program. As far as city dwellers are concerned, though they don't realize it, their consumption patterns can destroy forests as effectively as a chainsaw. Delhi's wood comes all the way from the forests of Assam. Trees are felled not only for fuel, but also for pulp, paper, plywood, packaging and mining industries, to name only a few. The demand is nearly 5 times as much. As a result, our forest resources are constantly under threat, and India is not alone in this. At the current rate of consumption, Asia's remaining timber reserves will be gone in 40 years. Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Philippines and Thailand are also in trouble as far as forests are concerned. In India, annual losses caused by floods are 14 times higher than they were in 1951. Why? The reason is because there aren't enough trees to hold the soil together. In a word, deforestation is allowing floods to wreak greater havoc. The reasons for deforestation are many. To begin with, laws are broken by the timber mafia in several states, aided by powers above. Agricultural needs are seen as sacrosanct and viewed in isolation. Industrial needs are seen as crucial for revenue and growth. People's needs are seen as important to placate pressure groups. Rarely are all these needs seen in the context of what an ecosystem can sustain. For centuries, animals have shared the earth with humans, sheltered and fed by the forests. Today, much of our wildlife teeters on the brink of extinction, threatened by habitat loss, poaching and illegal trade. The cheetah went extinct in 1951.
The tiger population is perched precariously at 2,500 according to unofficial estimates. Only 15 to 20,000 elephants remain in India. The great Indian one-horned rhinos struggle for survival as their numbers are down to barely 1,500.
In the heart of the forests and other ecosystems are also thousands of plant species yet to be discovered. Many of these have benefits as yet unknown to us. In India, at least 2,500 plants are used for medicinal purposes. This means that there is a lot of money to be made if forests are preserved, particularly in South Asia. Instead, every hour wild relatives of rare plants that act as a gene bank are being lost. At the moment, only 8 types of crops are meeting 85% of the world's food requirements. Every 5 to 7 years, these crops succumb to diseases and new varieties of the same crop have to be developed from the wild one. All gene pools are insurance for the future. But at the rate at which we are clearing forests, as many as 1 million species will go extinct by the end of this century. What is being overlooked is that our survival is linked to the survival of these species. All creatures exist as links in several food chains and depend on other species in inexplicable ways. As more and more species become extinct, the effect will be felt by other species and finally affect humans. Over 95% of the world's population growth is taking place in developing countries, including India. Modern agriculture was introduced in India in the 60s to meet the expanding food needs of the exploding population.
Having lived through the experience of the Bengal famine of 2 million people being wiped out just for greed and profits by a foreign colonial power, independent India made food security and food self-sufficiency and food reliance its single most important development agenda. And this meant first that agriculture was at the center of our development planning.
Large-scale clearing of forests for intensive agriculture seemed a viable solution to food scarcity. The Green Revolution was born. High-yielding varieties of seeds, monocropping, chemical fertilizers, pesticides and mechanization became the mantra for a nation in need. Modern agriculture made us self-sufficient in food. There's no doubt about that. And yet, now it seems as if there's a limit to what chemicals can do. (1963) Punjab. High-yielding varieties of seeds are introduced. The new seeds yield thrice the amount of rice and wheat. However, they also need huge inputs of chemical fertilizers, pesticides and water. Over time, the high amounts of water needed for irrigation result in the depletion of the water table all over the country. Depletion of water tables can be shown to be linked to gradual desertification in otherwise fertile areas. Intensive irrigation combined with depleting water tables and plenty of chemical fertilizers has one more effect on the land. Salts get pushed to the surface. Fertile lands turn saline and unproductive. Waterlogging follows salination. Over 1/3 of Asia's productive land is infertile today, and that's not all. Farmers are discovering that every year they have to spend more on chemical inputs for wheat and rice crops than they did the previous year. One of the main reasons is monocropping, or growing only one type of crop on a farm. Crops like oilseeds and sugarcane, though slow growing, are essential for maintaining the organic cycle. Legumes help fix nitrogen, an important plant nutrient which also increases soil fertility. As traditional practices like multi-cropping and crop rotation were discarded in the modern age, the soil began to get depleted. For centuries, agricultural pests have plagued farmers, but pests have had natural enemies: insects, weeds, rodents. A single crop grown in a large area is a concentrated food source for pests, and therefore strong chemical pesticides are essential. These pesticides also kill the natural enemies of pests. This increases pest numbers, which in turn pushes up the demand for pesticides, forming a vicious circle. Over time, pests become immune to these pesticides. Environmentalists point to several disaster stories relating to pesticides. Here's one. In the mid-70s, a mysterious disease swept the Handigoda village in the Shimoga district of Karnataka. It began as a pain in the limbs and led to gradual wasting away of muscles. It transformed healthy villagers into cripples. Extensive research by the National Institute of Nutrition indicated that slow pesticide poisoning was the cause. Chemical fertilizers and pesticides inevitably find their way into water bodies and the soil. The villagers used to consume crabs from the fields, and over the years the pesticide residue in the crabs multiplied. India is the fourth largest consumer of pesticides in the world. Pesticides like DDT, which are banned in industrialized countries, are commonly used by farmers here. In India, scientists sampled 1,284 vegetables randomly. 60% were contaminated with deadly insecticides. Vendors all over the country routinely dip vegetables in water containing pesticides to protect them. Farmers even add pesticides to stored grain to deter pests. Few realize the damage this can do.
उल्टी सी भी हो जाती है जी, उससे उल्टी हो जाती है, दिमाग में चढ़ जाता है, चक्कर से आने लगते हैं और बेहोशी की सी हालत हो जाती है। और जैसे हाथ से हम मिलाते हैं तो हाथ चिपचिपे से ऐसे कुछ हो जाते हैं हाथ।
For centuries, fishermen have made this estuary their home. Its ample bounty sustained them. But today this unique ecosystem is under threat. Till a few years ago, most of the demand for fish in India was met by traditional methods of fishing. Fishing was dependent upon the natural elements. It was suspended during monsoons and fish breeding seasons. The catch was enough to meet a family's food needs with a surplus to sell. The process, though seemingly primitive, ensured that the fish had time to regenerate. As with many other traditional occupations, fishing too was modernized. With the coming of mechanized trawlers, territorial waters once reserved exclusively for traditional fishermen now have to be shared. Old-fashioned fishermen find that they just don't get enough to make a living anymore. Mechanized fishing caters to an export-oriented international market. Those species which bring the highest income are favored by trawlers and caught the year round. This interferes with breeding cycles and does not give marine creatures time to regenerate. This is the Gahir Panta beach, the world's largest nesting ground of the olive ridley turtle, a highly endangered species. Trawler fishing is causing the large-scale killing of these gentle giants. These rare turtles get tangled in the huge nets of mechanized fishing crafts and are often clubbed to death. For over 50 years, the Adivasis of Silda village lived on paddy farming and fishing. But 3 years ago, everything changed. The blue revolution, as aquaculture farming is called, is being actively encouraged in India. Since the huge demand for shrimps cannot be met by the sea, cultivation of fish in gigantic fish farms is happening along the coastline. These are grown primarily for export. High salinity levels are required to culture shrimps. Seawater is pumped in huge quantities onto the farms. This water is flushed untreated after use into nearby water bodies and onto agricultural land. Shrimp farms destroy fragile marine ecosystems, remove cyclonic cover, and convert fertile lands into treacherously salty and uncultivable patches. They also threaten the livelihood of millions of fishing and farming families. Mangroves are an integral part of marine ecology. They support a host of complex food chains. They bind marine soil and prevent floods. They also provide a barrier against cyclones and protect the entire hinterland. Like many other acts of willful environmental destruction at the hands of humans, the degradation of mangroves raises many critical questions. How is development defined? Who does it benefit the most? And lastly and most importantly, is consumption the only indicator of progress?